Guys, welcome to episode number 406. This is an interview that the Highlander Hunting Podcast over at highlanderhunting.com. John and Mike did an interview with me a while back, and this episode was featured on their podcast. And these are two great guys out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Welcome back, guys. It's Highlander Hunting. Whether you are a beginner or expert hunter, our goal is to provide you with the helpful information on backcountry hunting on public lands. I'm Mike McRae.
And I'm John McCann.
And today, guys, we got a really special guest. It's Jay Scott. If you guys are online at all or listen to podcasts, you've probably heard of him. As a matter of fact, I think if you search hunting through one of your podcast things, Jay's usually the first one to pop up. He's got a ton of downloads. His podcasts are great and have great content in it. He's a successful deer, turkey, elk, and sheep guide. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but I think you spend most of your time in the Southwest states. And John and I were talking about heading out for Coues deer hunting next January. It's going to be kind of one of our first destination hunts. So welcome to the show.
Guys, I'm excited to be on. It's always a great time of year to be talking. I do have to say I'm down here in Phoenix, Arizona, actually Scottsdale, and it's about 74 degrees. I'm in shorts, and I know you guys are up in Canada, but we're super blessed down here where I live in the Southwest to have really mild weather, and it's been a few, couple of months here of just absolutely beautiful weather.
Nice.
I'm anxious to talk to you guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we can't say the same about the weather right now. It's actually in a warm spurt right now. I don't know what it is right today, negative 5 degrees Celsius.
I think it's above zero now,
so
it's above freezing now, Jay. But we had we had some minus 30s there right around Christmas time. So it can get a bit chilly.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. We visited, been in Utah a few times, and usually in the springtime, and it's surprising actually how cool it can get at night there.
Yeah, it's a different kind of cool too. It's depending on where you're at. People go down and hunt with me in Mexico and such, and they see the weather, between say 25 degrees and 70 degrees, and they're like, "Oh, should I bring a jacket?" And I'm like, "Buddy, you have no idea how cold the desert is at 25 degrees. I don't know what it is about the air, but when it's 25 in the desert, it can be cold.
Yeah, it just gets right to your bones, hey?
Yeah, for sure.
So, Jay, how was your hunting season for 2017? How'd you do?
We're kind of right in the middle of it, to be honest with you. We are here in a few days headed to Sonora, Mexico to do our Coues deer hunts, which is our annual hunt in Sonora, Mexico. We hunt northern Sonora, and we leave this Thursday actually to head down, and we do 2 fully guided trips back to back where we have a travel day on each side and 7 full days of hunting in between, and we're gone for 18 or 19 days straight.
Wow.
With 2 different groups going to 2 different ranches, so everybody gets to hunt a fresh ranch. But backing up, it's definitely been a good year. I actually took a position. A friend of mine bought a ranch in south central Colorado. He bought it in September, 40,000 acre private ranch, and wanted me to manage the hunts on the property. But the interesting thing is actually the hunts, we didn't do any hunts this fall, and we're looking at possibly doing some hunts this coming fall, but me and a kid named Hunter that works for me, we spent pretty much all October, November putting out trail cameras, glassing from different knobs, basically learning the ranch, familiarizing ourselves with the elk and the mule deer and the turkey that live on the property. And I was fortunate, Hunter Meekum, he works for me. He's a big lion hunter, comes from a real historic lion hunting family out of Utah, and he actually brought his dogs up, and I was able to harvest a lion with dogs, and it was an amazing time to watch those dogs really working. And what's ironic is that's actually the 44th mountain lion that I've seen with my own eyes, and it's the first time I've ever killed one.
Well,
I have a lot of history with mountain lions, doing the Coues deer hunts in Sonora, Mexico since 1999. I've had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of long-range glassing and looking at a lot of deer, and in turn, I guess one of the benefits of that is we get to see a lot of lions. We definitely average a couple of lions a year, and sometimes 4, 5, 6 lions in a season. But it was the 44th lion that I've actually seen, and it's the first one I harvested, and it was just a really neat experience, and a nice mature tom, and that was a lot of fun.
awesome.
And then I didn't draw any tags myself for personal hunts, but I was able to guide a desert bighorn sheep hunter here in Arizona, in my home state, on December 1st. My client was able to harvest a beautiful ram, real high-scoring, beautiful ram, especially for the unit, 10-year-old ram. And that was a really rewarding hunt. My client actually hurt in an accident. He's in his 50s, but when he was 18, he got paralyzed from the waist down. And so actually, he had what's called a champ permit, which allows you to hunt from a vehicle in the state of Arizona. And I knew that it was going to be a fairly tough task to, get a bighorn sheep from the vehicle. But we were actually very fortunate, and I had some buddies of mine that had been watching a big ram, and sure enough, we found him the day before the season, and basically watched him, and were able to get him the next day, and he's the biggest ram shot in the unit, and just a big, beautiful ram.
Oh, he must have been pretty happy with that then.
Super happy, super stoked, incredible guy. He owns a gun shop here in Scottsdale, actually a real high-end shotgun and antique type gun. His dad has passed away, but his dad, I think the family business, I think it's like 50 or 55 years in business. They started it in Southern California, but it's called William Larkin and More. And if anybody's into antique guns or side-by-side shotguns, they probably know. They sell guns anywhere from $3,000 up to $150,000 or even more for some of these real antique shotguns. But just a really neat guy, knows a ton about firearms, and it was really fun to kind of hunt with them and scout with them, and was real happy when he got a really nice ram.
That's cool. Question about your desert bighorns. So, what kind of country are you hunting those in an alpine environment, or?
No, so our desert bighorn we have desert bighorn kind of throughout the whole state of Arizona, and we have two types of bighorns, desert bighorns. We have the Mexicana, which are primarily safe, just as a general rule of thumb, like from Phoenix south to the Mexican border. And we have a lot of them in the western deserts. And then we've got our Nelsonite desert bighorn, which are kind of in the northwest part of the state, up by Kingman and up along the Nevada and Utah border, all the way up to the Kaibab Plateau, and even in units 9 and 10. Those are the Nelsonite.
Okay.
But the country that they inhabit is basically your desert, from desert floor of, say, 500 feet elevation up to, say, probably 3,000 feet to 2,500 feet for the Mexicana. But then the Nelsonites live up in northwest Arizona, and that elevation is, usually around 3,000 to 5,000 feet.
Okay.
Our Rocky Mountain bighorn, we have a great, we have big trophy quality Rocky Mountain bighorn. They live in more of our alpine country, and they're found mostly in eastern Arizona, as well as central Arizona around that Camp Verde area.
Okay.
But Arizona is a super trophy-oriented state, where a long time ago they decided to manage more for upper age class animals, more for higher end trophies, and it has gotten the reputation over the years of being a state that you can draw and go harvest, whether it be a mule deer, a Coues deer, a sheep, an elk, whatever it may be. Most of those animals, the trophy quality is high because of the amount of tags that are limited. And, one of the greatest opportunities for people outside of the draw is, the over-the-counter deer hunts, which you can come down and hunt right during the peak of the rut, either for a Coues deer or a mule deer with your bow in the month of January. And it's an awesome opportunity to kind of experience the deer down here, and you hunt them right in the peak of the rut.
That'd be so cool. And for us up here, like for the majority of people in Western Canada, November 30th is the end of our hunting season, unless you have a late season
special draw
or like cow elk tag. So that's a really great way to extend your season and get away from the minus 30 for a little while.
Yeah, no kidding. I got a question for you, Jay. Just out of curiosity, your Rocky Mountain Bighorns you were talking, you were saying they don't a whole lot of tags, and so the herds are really healthy. As an American, like how often can you hunt them?
Well, to be honest with you, Mike, in the state of Arizona, you can only harvest one bighorn sheep in your lifetime. So you can harvest a Rocky Mountain Bighorn, one, and then you can harvest one desert bighorn, whether it be a Mexicana or Nelsonite. You can only harvest one. So, the answer, always on the guides test, there's a question, how many bighorn can you harvest in the state of Arizona? Well, the answer is two. You can harvest one Rocky Mountain, you can harvest one desert bighorn, but they're very difficult to draw. Most of the tags, you can draw a sheep tag, a desert bighorn sheep tag. I mean, I've heard of people drawing with no points, and I actually guided a few years ago a young girl named Avery Helms. I want to say she was like 12 or 13 years old, and she only had 2 bonus points. So every year you hear of it where someone with, 0 to say 3 points that is a non-resident drawing a tag. So don't ever think that you can't draw. But I also know people, George Richardson, who actually harvested a ram in the same unit that I guided this year. He's 81 years old and has been applying before they even had bonus points. So I think he had like 28 or 29 points, and he still hadn't drawn his tag, and he finally drew this year.
Wow, that's awesome. That's one thing where we count our blessings here. Believe it or not, we can hunt Rocky Mountain Bighorn on a general tag here every year.
Yeah, no, it's a great opportunity for Canadian citizens, for sure. The success isn't very high, and, it's always a trade-off. The way I look at it is, people ask me, would you rather live in a state where you could hunt everything over the counter? And my answer is, yeah, that'd be cool. But most totally over-the-counter states, or very liberal states as far as giving out tags here in the United States, their quality isn't very good.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've kind of gotten to the point where I like going out and seeing big, mature animals. And, growing up here in Arizona, you kind of, in a way, get jaded in that you're so used to high-end trophy quality that, you do become jaded. But I feel like it's awesome to have those opportunities. Just like in Colorado, there's tons of over-the-counter elk opportunities where you can, every year, whether you're a resident or a non-resident, you can just go and buy a tag and go archery elk hunting when they're bugling over the counter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great, but there's also lots of areas you go to where it just gets pounded, and actually the quality of hunt is not as good. So it's kind of a trade-off. One thing that Arizona, it is awesome when you do get a tag, pretty much no matter what it's for, the quality of the hunt is phenomenal, and the experience is out of this world.
Excellent.
Just as an observation from a Canadian point of view, is that up here, you don't ever really hear provinces talk about how they're managing the resource. Like you don't often hear say, "Oh, we're managing for opportunity," or "We're managing for age class." So I think it's really it's really interesting from our point of view to hear that's a discussed thing, and that there's a goal that they're trying to achieve down there, and I find that really interesting. Like, we interviewed a guy from Idaho named Robbie Denning, and we were talking about mule deer, and in he has a book as well, and in his book he talks about how various states are managing their herds. And again, for Canadian, it's it's new. It's a new conversation.
Yeah.
It's just not one that we ever hear locally.
Yeah, for sure. We are pretty fortunate in that a lot of our conservation groups, whether it be the Arizona Deer Association, the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society, the Arizona Elk Society, Arizona Bowhunters Association, whatever it might be, these groups actually have quite a bit of say in the public meetings and the feedback to the wildlife managers. It's pretty neat to be able to have somewhat of a voice and somewhat of a input into how our states manage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, Jay, what do you think? Are you ready to talk some Coues deer?
I'm always ready to talk Coues deer. You guys probably caught me at a great time because I've been going down to Mexico since 1999, and we leave on Thursday, and I'm just fired up about it, and we're all systems go. And Dar and I've been getting our groceries and getting everything all ready, and getting the rangers and
Right.
trailers and everything packed, and getting the optics, getting everything ready. So yeah, let's talk some Coues deer for sure.
Great.
Right on. So let's start off right at the base here. When I started listening to your podcast here, I actually had to Google to see what a Coues deer looked like. So for one of us that's wanting to come down and hunt next year, can you just describe Coues deer to us, and how would they differ from the deer we're used to seeing up here, the whitetail and mule deer?
Yeah, so the whitetail and mule deer that you're used to seeing, I'm going to guess are somewhere on the hook, in that 200 pound plus, maybe even up into the 300s. You can correct me there, but
Yep.
a much bigger body. The Coues deer that we're hunting in Arizona and in Sonora, and there's a few over in western New Mexico. That's really the only place that Coues deer are found. You're looking at a big buck is going to probably be 110 pounds.
Oh, wow.
From young bucks, anywhere from 75 pounds on up to that, the big buck's 110. Maybe you might get a giant that's 115, maybe 120 pounds, but 110 is probably a good general rule of thumb. They're probably going to be about, a mature buck is probably going to be about the size of maybe your yearling fawns.
Okay.
Is my guess. But that 100 pound where your does are going to weigh in at that, probably, 65 to 90 pounds, I would guess, and your bucks are going to be, that 75 to that, 110 pound range. Now, keep in mind, the one thing about Coues deer that's so awesome is because they have smaller bodies, when their racks, they get over 100 inches, they start to look really big on their head. And I can't tell you how many Midwestern or Eastern, U.S. guys that I've had, and even some guys from Canada, where when they see a big Coues deer, they freak out. They're like, that thing's a giant, that's a monster. Well, you know how when your big deer, weigh 300 pounds, they kind of mask or they kind of shrink that rack up. Whereas the body, a big body, 110 pounds, you put a 100-inch or bigger rack on a Coues deer, on the hoof, on their head, they look big.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
They're really neat deer. They're a real petite, beautiful deer. They're extremely wary. Their whole life, from the time they're born, coyotes are trying to eat them, bobcats are trying to eat them, mountain lions are trying to eat them, and then, of course, we're trying to hunt them.
Mm-hmm.
They're extremely wary. It's often said for Coues deer hunters down here that, where did they go? They dug a tunnel and they just disappeared. And, if you take your eye off them, you run the risk of never seeing them again. It can be a challenge to find them. And then once you do find them, it can be a challenge to keep your eye on them. They're fairly nocturnal deer, meaning when you have big full moons, you got to watch out that they're not going to lay all day and party all night, so to speak, eat all night.
Mm-hmm.
They're really keen and aware, and they hold tight like a quail. So, excuse me, walking up on them, they can be tough because they can hold, and you think, man, I must have spooked them, and then you look over and they're literally like 15 yards away looking at you, and then you lock eyes with them and they just squirt out of there, but they'll hold really, really tight, which for a bow hunter can work to your advantage as long as you know that, okay, he's still right there and I'm getting really, really close and I need to, be ready, have your release on your string and, be ready to pull back because he's literally right here within bow range. They are what I would consider probably one of the best trophies you can harvest with a bow. It's not something that I've really focused on, mainly because when you can hunt them with the bow, I've been since '99 spending the majority of my time in Sonora, Mexico, chasing them, in December and January. But I have a lot of friends that hunt them, every year in Arizona with a bow and arrow, and they'll jump the string on you so fast you won't even know what hit you. And I say any Coues deer with a bow, spot and stock, is a great deer. And you can also sit water. There's lots of other tactics you can use, but one-on-one spot and stock Coues deer with a bow and arrow is about as difficult as it comes as far as actually getting one killed.
Okay. So when you're looking for them and you're scouting for them, what kind of habitat are you looking for? Is it the creek bottom type thing, or are they on the sides of mountains, or where would you find them?
So Coues deer primarily range from, and just speaking in generalities, they're going to range from about 3,500 feet up to probably about 7,000 feet. With, if I had to pick a 1,000 foot, range of Coues habitat, I would say between 4,000 and 5,000 feet. And they are often found in, the lowest they'll be found is like the low deserts with ocotillo and a lot of cactus, ironwood and palo verde. And then kind of the next zone up is, kind of the zone I like the most, where you've got a mix of ocotillo cactus, which if you guys have seen them, kind of starts at the base, and then there's basically just, 8 to 10 to 12, 15 like sticks going up, and then each one of those sticks have little pokers on them.
Oh yeah.
That's ocotillo. So from the ocotillo kind of desert on up into the yellow grass country of, say, southern Arizona that has a lot of mesquite trees. And then as you keep climbing in elevation, you kind of roll out of the ocotillo and mesquite into the next zone, which is kind of the oaks. We have white oaks. We have all sorts of oaks, but, our oaks are going to be a smaller oak that's probably, say, 10 feet tall, maybe, depending, there's some bigger oaks, but, 10, shorter than the big oak trees that you'd see like in California or maybe even in the Midwest where, you have these giant trees.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that's kind of the oak and yellow grass, and then you move on up into the pine, and the deer in the pines, the Coues deer can live right there in the pine trees as well. So they're an unbelievable deer in the fact that they have a huge zone that they can live in, but the general rule of thumb is, that, 3,500 to say 5,000 or, 4,000 to 5,000 feet is kind of prime time, money zone for Coues deer. And pretty much anywhere in Arizona, say south of Flagstaff, if you get in that zone that, say 4,000 to 5,000 feet, you're most likely going to have Coues deer.
Okay. Oh, they sound wild. So if you're hunting around there, so they're obviously pretty adaptable. For the new guy going down there, is there any kind of food source or something they really like in their diet that they would pick above others, like something that a hunter can target or concentrate on?
I would definitely target mesquite, ocotillo, mesquite, and oak trees. And, you can go pretty much anywhere from, say, Tucson south and go anywhere you want over 3,000, over 3,500 feet up to, say, 5,000, and you will get up on a high point and glass around, and you're going to find Coues deer. The mule deer are going to inhabit the lower country, and sometimes, in some cases, the higher country. But typically, your desert mule deer are going to be in the lower, below 3,000 feet, whereas the Coues deer kind of start at 3,000. But if you Google any photos, southern Arizona grasslands, or just Google, southern Arizona mesquite country or southern Arizona oak country, you'll get kind of a visual of what I'm talking about, and it's that kind of beautiful rolling, and sometimes very rugged, but it's that yellow grass with that contrast of either the mesquite or the oak trees, and that's where you'll find your Coues deer.
Okay.
So seasonally, do they have a migration pattern? Like, are you expecting them to move with the spring or with the rainy season?
So Coues deer are very, comparing them to other animals, they're very home range oriented. They're very much home bodied. A doe, might live. There was a study that was done probably 20-some years ago by Richard Ockenfeld. I'm not sure if he was out of Arizona State or out of U of A, but I've read this study many times, and they collared a bunch of deer, and it showed how when a fawn is born into one piece of country, they live and die their whole life in that country, and they very rarely travel out of an 800-yard circle.
Wow, that's small.
Bucks, the real tight range, real home range oriented. Granted, if they get pushed or pressured or what have you, they can move to adapt, but they most of the time will live within an 800-yard circle their entire life. Now, the only thing that throws that out, to answer your question, John, was the bucks in the rut. So kind of mid to late December, when those bucks start to want to chase does, which the month of January is kind of the prime rut in a general nutshell for Coues deer. Those bucks can travel 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, but the does themselves usually are a very tight home range. Usually they have 1 or 2 water sources within that 800-yard circle, and they stay put. Now, one of the things that you can do as a hunter to use that as your advantage is when you find a buck, any time other than, say, after December 15th, before December 15th and after January 30th, so, 11 and a half or 10 and a half months out of the year, that buck is probably going to be within 200 or 300 yards of where you just saw him for 10 and a half months.
Wow.
So our rifle seasons that we have in Arizona, we have pretty liberal as far as tag numbers in October and November where you can hunt with a rifle. If you find a big giant buck, more than likely, unless someone gets in there and pushes him or kicks him out, and he feels so much pressure that he leaves the area, he will live right in that small circle of a couple hundred yards the whole year. Okay. So a lot of times guys are out there in the summer and they're patterning these deer when they're in velvet, and either hunting them in our August archery season, which is over the counter, or scouting them all of when they're growing their antlers, June, July, August, and September, and then trying to harvest them then in the October, that first rifle season, because of their home bodiness, because they stay in a small circle.
Okay.
Well, when you guys are talking about coming down either in the December or the January seasons, when the rut is on, you want to focus mainly on areas where there's lots of does, and where there's lots of does, those bucks will show up. Now, granted, I'm not going to tell you that a big buck that you watch in the summer isn't going to rut in that same circle that he's in, in January, but a lot of times those bucks actually leave that country and go seeking does, and they'll try and breed as many does as they can, so they travel around a lot. Just think about it, if you could only, breed once a year, you'd probably put a major focus on it as well.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So, when a guy's going down there to scout, I'm making the assumption that the scarce resource is water, and should that be, where you focus your energy if you're using, say, Google Earth to do a little bit of e-scouting before you head on down there? If you're doing the DIY style of hunting, is it look for water and then get down there and look for does to verify that area?
I think that's a good starting point on a year like this where we're in a severe drought here and everything is oriented and focused on water. I think any of the guys listening that are going down this season, yes, it's all about water. Those deer are going to be within a half mile of water would be my bet, and especially the does. and it hasn't rained, so we've got, no pocket water in the bottom of the canyon, so they are, honed in or, excuse me, dialed in on water. But even more importantly than doing your research on Google Earth, I would myself talk to wildlife managers for each unit, each area that you're thinking of concentrating on. I would call and talk to the forest, look on the map and see whether it's, whatever national forest it is, and try and talk to individuals about certain areas within those units that, are good mountain ranges. And on the Game and Fish website alone, you can go in, say, Unit 34A or 33 or 36, whatever unit you're choosing, and there's usually an outline summary from the Game and Fish officer, the wildlife manager that works that unit, and he'll say, like Temporal Canyon is a good one to try, and, Madera Canyon and Redfield Canyon, from the road, Forest Service Road XYZ to XYZ, is a good area. And so I would start there.
Okay.
And then from there, then I would break it down and say, okay, I think I'm going to focus on Unit 34A or Unit 35B or Unit, whatever it may be, 31, whatever unit. And then I would talk to the unit manager in that unit, find out, the higher concentrations of areas, ask them questions where do the hunters go? Are there areas that, there is good concentrations, but maybe the hunters don't get to? Those would all be questions that I asked. And, on my podcast, we cover a lot of, specific how to scout, what you would be doing. But I think rather than, going tight originally, I would probably start a little broad and then try and focus maybe on 2 units. Then I would try and learn as much as I can about 2 units, and then maybe I would just pick one, and then I would hone in and I would Google Earth and put, label all the roads, label all the 2-track roads, label all the water sources, start identifying, glassing points, big cone knobs, ridge lines, stuff like that to be able to, move forward with your hunt, so to speak.
Okay.
Good.
So you mentioned phoning the Fish and Game office, and that's, I find, something too that's quite different between up here in Canada and the U.S. Like, talking to a wildlife manager is not something that's usually talked about up here.
Yeah.
So for guys like John and myself that are green at it and going in blind, if they phone the Game and Fish office, so it's the wildlife manager we want to ask for?
Yeah, I would ask for the wildlife manager for that unit.
Okay.
And they are very accustomed to talking to hunters and dialing hunters in. Now, I would not be calling them right now, right before the season. Mm-hmm. I would go ahead and call them more in their downtime.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So, Jay, you mentioned prime rut for the Coues deer is in January. Most guys is going to be the way John and I are going to operate. Like, usually we're going to probably have a week window to do it. If you had to pick any week in January, is there one that's better than the other?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you only have 1 week and you have the ability and the opportunity to pick the prime week, I would plan on coming, and it differs a little bit in the part of the state that you're going in. So, near Tucson and what I would call southern Arizona, I would probably pick from about January 10th to about January 20th. That's a 10-day window there when, if you're only coming down for a week period, I would want to come down when I know that the deer are actively seeking and chasing does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially when you come down for your first time. I think the ability to be able to glass deer chasing does when they're in their most vulnerable stage is your best opportunity. So definitely January 10th to January 20th, year in and year out, that is going to be a great window.
Okay.
Now, if there is a major bright full moon during that period, you may want to, hedge it one way or another. Because hunting during a full bright moon, if they're not rutting yet, so if they're just starting, it sometimes can slow them down.
Mm-hmm.
But year in and year out, January 10th through January 20th is is prime time. Now, when you start talking about some of the central Arizona units, and you're in the 22, the 23, the 6 days, some of those units, it's at a higher elevation, and it's in a more northern, and so they rut a little bit earlier. So I would say more like, a January 5th through like a January 15th,
Okay.
just a little bit earlier. Quite honestly, any time the month of January is good, but if you can really hone in on that mid part of January and try and hit that peak time when they're really actively chasing does, that's when you're going to come down and probably have the most opportunity. Now, keep in mind, those bucks are going to be chasing does actively and moving around a lot, which actually can create a whole nother issue for bow hunters in that, you go to make your stock and the buck is literally chasing the other, the does around and other bucks off, that by the time you get over there, they're 3 ridges over.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But what it allows you to do is it allows you to get up and glass these deer, watch them, and what I recommend is watch them for a while before you just go taking and making a stock.
Mm-hmm.
Watch how they chase does around, and they constantly are chasing them around, and they come through the same saddle, and you just out there and you watch them, and they're chasing this doe, and they just keep coming through the same saddle. I would go and try and get in that saddle and just try and utilize that pattern that you just watched them doing, because they'll literally chase a doe all day long. And then when a doe is really hot, you could have 4, 5, 6, 7 bucks on one doe.
Oh, wow.
And you could have hellacious fighting. For as small as they are, they're very, very hardy in, they've got a lot of fight, and they've got a lot of heart, and they don't give up easy, and you can use that movement to your advantage if you have the ability to get in pretty close, have the wind in your favor, and let them kind of make it happen and let them come to you, so to speak.
Okay. So, what's their pattern typically during the daylight then?
Well, when it's in the peak of the rut, they only have one thing on their mind, and that's chase does, that's breed does. They don't even care about eating. They don't care about anything.
Okay.
And quite honestly, they'll do it all night as well if the does will let them.
Okay.
One of the challenges, like I was saying, when there's a full moon, is if there's a real bright moon, they're going to rut and chase does all night. And then the does are going to be tired, so they're going to be wanting to lay down, and so you won't get as much activity during daylight hours. When it's a dark moon, because they want to stay alive and not get eaten by lions, they're going to stay down and stay hunkered and stay bedded. So your best case scenario is when you have dark moon periods, cold temperatures, and those peak, 7 to 10 day windows of when the deer, the does are cycling, when they're really going to be rutting.
Okay. So, by the sounds of it, like, this is a lot of the spotting game. Is there any kind of rattling or calling in strategies you can use to bring them into you during that time?
Yeah, now I'll tell you that I don't have a lot of experience myself with it. It's just something that I haven't messed with a whole lot. But I do know people that routinely rattle in bucks and routinely, doe bleat bucks in, other does in, and then, have success shooting bucks. So I would say yes. I mean, get in close to where those deer are and do some rattling. Do some, the old Primos can that you can roll over and it kind of goes.
Yeah.
I've heard of those working, and I've heard of rattling working as well. And it's like anything else that you go to call. Some deer are lovers and some are fighters, and some want competition and some don't. I would tell you in general, the Coues deer is a very ferocious pound for pound animal that it's very susceptible to rattling some antlers together.
Okay. Have you got any other that you know of sort of unique rules down in Arizona that say they're not common in some of your neighboring states like Utah and Colorado? You got any little oddball ones down there that trip people up?
Oh, I mean, there's broadhead requirements. certain width of, cutting diameters, and I want to say it's 45 pounds on, your bow house. You have to be able to pull 45 pounds. I'm not sure if there's a let-off requirement or not, 80 and under, or 85 and under. It seems like there is no let-off requirement, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I would definitely consult the game and fish regulations, for sure.
You bet.
And, before you come down.
Yeah.
I think one thing that needs to be pointed out, and you guys probably have in your questions, is finding these deer and glassing these deer. You really need to get a tripod. You need to be able to see these deer effectively. You need to glass sitting down with a tripod. Now, you heard me say sitting down. I'll say it again. You need to glass sitting down. Say it again. You need to glass sitting down. I sound like a broken record. I see it over and over and over. These different people are glassing Coues deer standing up. And granted, there are times when standing up is, you need to do it because you're on a point. You can't get sitting down. There's vegetation or what have you. But to effectively find Coues deer and do it routinely, you need to be sitting down in a comfortable position, either on your butt or on a stool. You need to be glassing with a tripod. If you come down here without a tripod, that is the single biggest mistake I think you could possibly make. You cannot consistently and routinely glass these deer up in the vegetation and where they live without a tripod.
Okay.
Now, I cannot be more adamant about you have to have a tripod, period, and you have to mount your binoculars to the tripod so that there's no vibration, if there's no shake. And I can't tell you how many times you find a Coues deer, whether it be a doe or a buck, and he's out there at 1,000 yards, and you see him plain as day, and you take your eye out of the binos for just a second, you pop back in, and you go, he's gone. Where'd he go? He's gone. You're looking through binoculars that are mounted on a tripod. There's no vibration. There's no shake. And you've just taken your eye out, and you say he's gone. And you're telling your buddy, he was just standing right there in my binos. And he's like, where is he? And then you see an ear flick, or you see a tail flick, or you see a leg move. And he or she is standing right in the center of your binos, and you literally thought the deer was gone. If you show up without a tripod to hunt Coues deer, I would say you might as well not even come.
Okay. So what are you running for binoculars then? What power? 10 power for them, or?
Well, I have 10 power. I'm a huge Swarovski fan.
Okay.
I believe Swarovski optics make the best optic in the world. I believe, I've tried everything. I've had everything, and I've had basically every generation of Swarovskis made. The clarity is absolutely phenomenal. I run 10 power ELs, 10 by 42 ELs. I have the 10 by 42 EL range, but then I get more serious with the 15 power. The new 15 power Swarovskis, in my mind, are the ultimate binocular for glassing Coues deer.
Okay.
And the one thing about 15 power is you can't handhold 15 power.
No.
15 power limits your field of view. It has a smaller field of view than 10, but where the 15 power is really going to come out nice is the fact that when you're looking out there at long distances, and those deer, like I said, are standing stationary, they're not moving, and all of a sudden they flick their ear, and you would never pick that up with a handheld 10.
Okay. Right. Jay, out of curiosity, have you had any experience with that Swarovski modular, I think it's the ATX spotting scope with dual eyepieces?
Yeah, for sure. I got one of the first BTX eyepieces when they came into the United States. I was fortunate to be one of the first people to get that dual eyepiece, and I'm a Swarovski lover. I've had basically all the generations of spotting scopes. I've had multiple pairs of 15s. Every time they come up with a new 15 power, I'm getting that. I've gone through basically all the generations of spotting scopes. I have the 95 millimeter, I call it the Big Daddy, the 30 to 70 power eyepiece. And then when they came out with these BTX, the one thing you guys need to know is last Coues deer season, I actually switched to, I had Dr. Optics, 40 power super wide angle Doctor optics, and I used those for years. Then I switched to the Koa Highlander, the 32 by 82. They're 14 pounds. The tripod's 14 pounds. I was about 28.5 pounds before I even put anything in my backpack.
Wow.
And then last season, I switched to the twin Swarovski spotting scopes, and they're actually the 25 to 50 eyepiece with the 65 millimeter. This is the STS model, and there's actually a company out of Prescott, Arizona here, Wells Manufacturing, that makes a bracket, and I'm basically glassing with two 65 millimeter spotting scopes side by side, and I used them all booster season last year, and they're 7.5 pounds, which is, I'm saving 7 pounds right there compared to my Koas that I sold. Well, I had used them the full season, and then at the shows, I started hearing, I know some of the guys at Swarovski, and they were saying, we're coming out with a dual eyepiece, BTX Swarovski spotter, and, they were asking me my opinion on my twin spotters and what have you. Well, anyway, I got the BTX, and I would say my overall impression is that, excuse me, the quality is fantastic. The ease of use is like looking through a pair of 10 by 42 EL Swarovski binoculars, and the quality is great, and the ability to have a 65 millimeter objective, an 85 millimeter objective, or a 95 millimeter objective, and be able to have, both, which is, I have the 65 and I have the 95. I don't have the 85, but in other words, you can be at 4.14 pounds with the 65 millimeter on the BTX eyepiece, or you can be at 6.5 pounds with the 95. So that's still a pound lighter than my twin Swarovski spotting scopes, which I fell in love with Coues season last year. And the one reason I like them so much is they're so much lighter than the Koa. So now you throw the BTX in the middle. After getting to use them all summer and all fall, I would tell you that I am a straight eyepiece guy, meaning I've never liked angled spotting scopes. And although I love the BTX and it's lighter than my twin Swarovski spotters, I just cannot get used to the angled eyepiece. Now, there's tons of people out there that they say, oh, I like the angled eyepiece better than the straight eyepiece, and so that's perfect for me. And I would tell you that if Swarovski made them in a straight eyepiece, I would be using the BTX exclusively. But because of the function of it being angled alone, I am here this Coues season, the twin spotters, I didn't sell them. They're going right back in the starting lineup, and I'll be using them Coues season. And yes, I'll be carrying 1 more pound, but for me, one of the things that I like about the twin spotters is the ability to be on 25 power in my right eye, find a big buck. I can keep my right eye, this is talking about the twin spotters, I'm on 25 power, I keep my right eye on the buck, I reach up with my left hand and I crank the power to 50 on my left eye and focus on my left eye. Then I switch, now I'm looking through my left eye, I crank it to 50 on my right eye and focus, and in a matter of about 10 seconds, I went from 25 power to 50 power, and I never took my eye off of the buck. Oh, wow. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I can be sitting on my butt and glassing, out, whereas with a BTX, you have an angled eyepiece, and the angled eyepiece, if you're sitting up high on a knob, and you go to look downhill, in other words, the angle of the eyepiece, you have to then bring your head and your whole body up, because now the angle of the objective lens is aiming down, which is making the eyepiece be more even vertical.
Right.
Which then means you have to use a glassing stool.
Oh, good point.
And being a Coues hunter that packs, all kinds of stuff on my back, and the older I get, I'll be 45 next month, the lighter that I can keep things, the better. That's a long answer to the question of, yes, the BTX is fantastic. The quality, optical quality is fantastic. It's super lightweight, pound per pound. It's, it can't be beat. But if you're an angled person, great. If you can't get used to the angle, that's a deal killer for me. I still love Swarovski optic, but I'm definitely using the twin spotters this Coues deer season.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I like that idea with the twin spotters, how you don't have to take your eyes off them. John's looking to upgrade his spotting scope system this year, so we won't be able to tell Krista that he needs 2 spotting scopes now. That might not fly.
Yeah, and it's a great thing. Your wives really like to swallow that when you've been trying to tell them you need a new spotting scope, and then you break it to them that not only do you need 1, but you need 2.
Yeah.
They really like that.
Yeah.
They really like that.
JB talked a little bit earlier on kind of as a tactic concentrating on the water holes, and I was just listening to your previous podcast you did on your show about Coues deer hunting, and there's quite a bit of talk about cougar activity around the watering holes. And I notice a lot of podcasts in the States are quite different than here. There's a lot of talk about being able to carry a sidearm while you're archery hunting, which is completely foreign up here. Like if I got into our handgun rules up here, you'd just laugh. But for a Canadian going down there that's going to be kind of concentrating on those watering holes where there is going to be high populations of cougars, do you offer any kind of advice or precautions a guy should take?
Not really. I mean, like I said, I was able to harvest the lion in Colorado. That's the 44th one. I've had a couple close encounters, like 2 barrel lengths, like encounters, with mountain lions, and yeah, they'll eat you fast. But there's they're absolutely afraid of you. Mm-hmm. The only way they're going to come after you is if you get them cornered or if you get them in a position where they have no choice. As far as personal protection, it wouldn't be something that I would worry about at all. I would be more worried about, illegal aliens or, people crossing over the border, drug runners and that kind of such, more than a mountain lion. So from a personal protection standpoint, now keep in mind our alien traffic coming across the border has severely died down since President Trump's been in office.
Okay.
And I don't have the exact stats, but he absolutely made a point that they're going to crack down on the border, and they have done so. Now, I would tell you, 5 to 10 years ago, it was absolutely the Wild West out there, and it's nothing like what it used to be. But people do need to be aware that if they're coming down, that you may see some activity, see some people walking, see some people hiking across the desert, and I dealt with it for years, and you just stay away from them. But it is definitely something that you need to know that is out there, and I think is a much bigger concern than a mountain lion. Now, keep in mind, you can buy a mountain lion tag, you can shoot them with your bows, you can also bring a pistol and wear on your side, and you can shoot them with a handgun or what have you. The likelihood of seeing them on a year like this when it's dry, if you're going to sit water exclusively, I mean, you dang sure could have a lion come in and right to the water tank, and it's just something else that you could add that you could hunt while you're down here.
Okay.
As well as I think I should mention the javelina. Most of the units in January you can put in ahead of time. There are even some over-the-counter units or leftover tag units where you can apply for a javelina tag at the same time, and they cross the same country that the Coues deer are in, the javelina are in. And if you're sitting water, for sure, I mean, it's almost, I'll bet in a week, a given that you're going to have shots at javelina. So if you're going to do that, make sure to put in the spring ahead of time for those javelina tags. And you just check the Arizona Game and Fish regulations. There's certain times you can apply for javelina and what have you, but might as well have a javelina tag in your pocket at the same time. As well as, guys, I need to mention, there's mule deer areas that overlap these Coues deer, and it's Coues deer and mule deer. So any antler deer in those January hunts. So in other words, you can be hunting mule deer or Coues deer, and there's lots of units. Like I said, if you're in that 2,500 to 3,000 foot range, where you have overlapping, where you could see just as many mule deer as you do Coues, and keep that in mind. It makes it a nice deal where you can chase both species of deer at the same time.
Okay. For our listeners, Jay, do you know like a ballpark price what it would be for the tags you mentioned? I phoned the one office, and I think, as I understood it, with everything in, it's about $300 US for a Canadian to come to Arizona and hunt the Coues deer. Do you know what it is for javelina, mule deer, and cougar?
Well, just to be clear, the mule deer is exactly the same tag. So, like I was saying, it's a mule deer, Coues deer tag. It actually says any antler deer, so it'd be the same price.
Wow.
But now keep in mind, you can only shoot one deer. It's not one Coues deer and one mule deer. It's just one antler deer.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And to answer your question, I don't. You can go to azgfd.gov and go right there on the hunting regulations and see the price. I'm going to say it's fairly nominal. $100, couple $100. It's price is it's fairly cheap, and it may be even cheaper than that, but I don't know it off the top of my head. No.
Okay.
Jay, just rewinding a little bit there. So you'd mentioned, the illegal alien crossing there. So, that just kind of gets me thinking about, for example, you're guiding down in northern Mexico, and and just the whole idea of hunting near that border and the challenges that come with that. Can you just speak to, Canadians, we're a long, long way from that border, and that stuff is very, very foreign for us. And can you just sort of just speak on the, is there a crime issue that a person would need to be concerned with, or how can you just speak on that? Because it's all really new to us.
Sure. So I would say in actual Mexico, I think you have less issues actually in Mexico than you would in the U.S.
Okay.
It's kind of twofold. When you're in the U.S., you can easily call authorities, call the Border Patrol, you can call the Sheriff's Office, you can call and you can have help there that you can speak English with and tell them what the problem is, whereas you can't when you're in Mexico. But I will tell you, since 1999, spending 60 to 75 days a year between my Coues deer and my Gould's turkey hunts down in Sonora, Mexico, I've never had an issue where I felt uncomfortable at all.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you, like I just said, it is getting better in Arizona, and the illegal alien traffic is getting better, whereas we've cut the numbers of illegals coming into the U.S. or coming into Arizona by a lot. I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm going to say by like 75%.
Okay.
I would tell you that from coming in Arizona's perspective, it's just something you need to be aware of. It's something that you need to be on alert. Just like if you were hunting in country where there's grizzly bears or black bears, where is it something that's going to make you not hunt there? No. But is it something that you kind of are aware of what's around you? Back when it was really bad, 5 to 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, people would go down and in their camps. Now, granted, we have thousands and thousands of hunters that are hunting the rifle seasons in these units, the archery seasons. We have a huge Border Patrol presence in these units. But I would hear stories about guys that would set a cooler out 30 yards from their camp, like where the little road pulls in and, like the camp, and they would just set a table, and they would set cups, and they'd set water right out on a table, and they put a sign that says, "Help yourself." I even heard stories where they would put an action packer out there with granola bars, and it would basically say, "Here's water, here's food, help yourself." And their idea was, if they set that out there, while the guys are out hunting during the day, they're not going to come back to their camp and have it ransacked, because all those people want to do is get something to eat and get something to drink. They do not want to hurt you in any way.
Yeah.
Okay? They're just trying to cross the border to make a better life for themselves, and without getting political or anything like that. I would probably do the same thing if I was in their position.
Yeah.
But they need water and they need food. Well, what I can tell you is things have gotten a lot better down there. But it's still something that when you hunt in southern Arizona, you always want to be aware. Maybe it's not a bad idea to camp in an area where you have real good visual in all directions. Maybe it's not a bad idea to camp next to someone and stop in and introduce yourself and say, "Hey, how about I camp 30, 100 yards up the road? We have a couple camps here, which is very common to kind of have clumps of camps, and there's always someone around in camp. You know, maybe that's not a bad idea. I don't want to bring it up to scare anyone at all, but it is something you need to be aware of when hunting in any state along the Mexican border. Those issues have been around for a long time.
Okay. So
it's very, very rare to hear of situations where, you know, someone comes into camp and holds hunters at gunpoint or stuff like that. What's more common and not near as common now is you would hear a lot, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, where the guys were out in the woods camping and they hiked back to their camp and they get there and their food is basically, they've gone through all their food and eaten and left.
Right.
So, you know, lock your food up, lock it inside your truck, you know, leave a cooler of water out, leave bottles of water out, and put a sign that says, help yourself, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, do it in Spanish. I mean, that goes a long way if someone needs a drink.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
You know, but kind of keeping your wits about you, just like if you're hunting in bear country, as far as you kind of are aware of you monitor who's coming, who's going. You know, if you see anything suspicious, you're going to report it. As far as on the Sonora side, all the traffic's going north. So, you know, we're going south, and we're going on locked ranches. Gates are locked. You know, the Mexican rancher has a ton of pull, has a ton of clout. You know, most of the trouble, so to speak, is going from Mexico into the U.S., and most of the trouble is within, say, 10 to 15 miles of the border. Well, there's a lot of units that you can pick that are, you know, 30, 40, 50 miles, 60, 70 miles north of the border that you're never going to have any issues.
Okay.
Yeah, you know,
and that's another question you can ask your game and fish and your Forest Service and the people you talk to. You say, are there areas within this specific unit that I really need to be careful and I really need to watch, you know, the illegal traffic? And if they say, yeah, XYZ Canyon, you need to stay out of there. We'll find it on your map and just go, okay, and say, you know, where are the safe zones where, you know, you have a heavy border patrol, you know, where there's you know, not issues. And every wildlife manager is going to be able to tell you where some of the hot spots are. And as long as you stay out of there, you know, you're going to have no issues.
Well, speaking of risks, Jay, what about other wildlife risks like snakes or things like that? Is there anything that a Canadian person ignorant of the desert should be concerned about?
I would say in January you don't really have much to worry about with snakes. They're in hibernation. It's very, very rare for a snake to be out. Okay. You know, because a lot of times you're getting your nighttime temperatures down in the 20s, and once they go into hibernation, they don't come out. So as far as the, you know, risk of snakes or scorpions or, you know, stuff like that, it's not really anything I think about. Now, granted, if I hunt down there in October or hunt down there in August, yeah, you got rattlesnakes, you know, all over the place and what have you. But that's one thing about December and January is your weather's usually so good. There's no snakes. You don't have to worry about any of that. You know, what bears are there? Usually they're in hibernation. The weather's usually beautiful, 25, you know, mid-20s in a low, up to the 70s during a high. And it's just beautiful, beautiful country for sure.
So on the hunts that you're doing, is it mostly northerners that you see, or who's going down there?
If you're talking about the Coues deer hunt in Sonora, Mexico, most of our hunts are anywhere from, say, an hour to, say, 5 hours south of the border. Have ranches leased all over a couple 100,000 acres, probably 15 or so different properties, maybe more. You know, big ranches, you know, ranging from, say, 10,000 acres to, you know, 30, 40,000 acres. Okay. They call them hectareas down there. It's basically 2.2 acres per hectarea. So if you have a 1,000 hectarea ranch, it's going to be 2,200 acres. To answer your question, who's going down? Most of the time, it's people from the U.S. I would say it's a mix of 50% of the people are from Arizona and 50% of the people come from all over the United States. I have had some groups of guys from Canada come down and do Gould's turkey hunts with us, and you know, people from all walks of life, to be be honest with you.
Okay.
So Jay, just for a new guy going down there and finding his way around, like we talked about the Fish and Game office, where I imagine you could pick up maps and stuff. Is there any kind of online or iPhone app that you can get that kind of shows you the areas you can and cannot hunt if you're on your own?
Really, you can to take that a step further. Arizona is 87% public land.
Oh, wow.
And so it's the majority, 83 or 87%. I think it's 17% private, so that'd be 83% public land. So any of your National Forest Service maps are going to show you your national forest ground. It's going to show you your BLM ground, your state ground. That's all huntable. On those maps, there's going to be white sections, and those white sections are typically private. Now, there are a lot of ranches in southern Arizona that are private, but they let people hunt them just like it's public. And then, some of it will be talking to the wildlife managers about, is this private ranch accessible or not accessible? Some people allow, walk-in traffic only. But one of the beauties about Arizona is that there's 80+% of the ground in the whole state is huntable, completely open to the public. So it's not near like concern at any other state you would hunt, where there's all kinds of private and there's all kinds of no-go zones. In general, you can pretty much go and hunt anywhere you want.
Okay. And I was also...
But I use the Topo Map program. It's the Phil Endicott Topo Map. You can get it like $6, and it has the whole United States. It has the full-blown 1 to 24,000 topo map on your iPhone. I use Google Earth a ton on my computer as well as on my handheld device. And those are and then I use Onyx Maps. I've been really, really impressed. When Onyx Maps first came out, to me it was a big dud. I was very, very disappointed with the time that it took to download, the time when you were in the field it took to, get the map to come up. I started using it again this fall. It had been a couple-year gap since I'd used it when they first came out, and I would say Onyx Maps is fantastic. It shows you private and public. It shows you who owns the private. It shows you all the roads. You can switch back and forth from topographical to aerial. Very, very big supporter and proponent of Onyx Maps. I've got no affiliation with them at all, but I'm really impressed with the way that the speed and everything that those maps have been able to load and such on my iPad and on my phone.
Okay. Now, when we go down, we'll have to talk to you some more after to see what you recommend, but we're looking at the Casa Grande, Tucson area, and I really realize all the units are a little bit different, but just speaking generally, like how is it for road ATV access in a lot of the units, and like how much should a guy expect to put on foot when you're hunting Coues deer?
Let me back up just for a second for you. If you're planning to hunt Coues deer, you're going to need to be further south than Casa Grande. You're going to need to be like from about Tucson south. Casa Grande, there's really no Coues deer in Casa Grande. That's a little too close to Phoenix.
Okay.
But between Tucson and Phoenix is basically, 100-mile stretch, and Casa Grande's about in the middle. That would be more of your mule deer country, more of your desert flats. You're going to need to be more, in Unit 33, around the Catalinas or the Rincons in 33, or even south of Tucson in Unit 34A in the Santa Ritas, or 34B in the Whetstones, or the Huachucas in 35A, or 35B, or the, Dos Cabezas. There's a whole bunch of mountain chains kind of from about Tucson south. That's where I would focus.
Okay.
What was the other question?
Just wondering what the access is like around, like what to expect for how deep you can get in on a pickup truck or ATV, or is a lot of it just foot access only?
No, you can there's a ton of what I call two-track roads all over southern Arizona. Most are completely accessible by a four-wheel drive pickup. Obviously, we use Rangers and quads just because you can double time it. It is sometimes rough. But there's lots of Coues deer hunting that you can do right from a two-wheel drive vehicle from, maintained county-type roads. But certainly there are lots of areas, me, that you can access through with a quad or a Ranger in those 2-track roads as well. And those would be questions I would be asking the wildlife managers.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
good.
So we'll be able to beat the heck out of our rental car down there.
Yeah, I know lots of guys that do.
Well, what we can talk about now, Jay, is just the different options for hunters going down, obviously being guided and non-guided. What would you say, just off the top of your head, the difference between the two is success rate?
Well, I think it's a pretty steep learning curve for someone coming down that doesn't even know where to go and has never seen a Coues deer. Whereas if you hire a guide and they not only, have seen a lot of Coues deer, they know how to kill them, they know exactly where to go, they know exactly where to glass, they know the areas of higher density, lower density, they know the water holes that the deer frequently use. I think one of the challenges you're going to run into when you come down and only have 7 days is you really need to focus in on a specific area. And I think that's what a guide can do, because they're going to take you to their honey holes. They're going to take you to places where they've gone and had success in the past.
Gotcha.
Whereas if you come on your own, it's going to be a little bit overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
One bit of advice I can give you is don't let it be overwhelming. Try and hone in and get specific and focus on certain areas. If you start seeing deer, dive in deeper and just keep going from there. But do a lot of homework before you come down. Talk to a lot of people and try and extract as much information about specifically where to go. But that's where a guide is really, really going to help you as far as talking in Arizona. That can really help. We also offer fully guided and do-it-yourself packages in Mexico. The one thing that I would say makes Sonora, Mexico a much better hunt is you have usually a lot more bucks to chase, and you have no other people or no other competition on the ranches with you. And then from a guided perspective, you have me and Dar and some of our guys, if you're talking specifically going with us, who have done it for many, many years and are, honed in and dialed in on what we're looking for. And we're not just looking to kill a buck, we're looking to kill, trophy bucks.
Right.
And then our do-it-yourself packages in Mexico are much of the same of what we've been talking about, but you basically cross the border yourself, you get to the ranch yourself, and you get up on high knobs and do your glassing and find the deer. But what you're dealing with in Mexico is deer that aren't pressured.
Right.
They're still as wary and still as wily as can be, but you have more opportunity to not be hunting pressured deer. You can leave a deer and know that you can go for 5 days and come back, and he's probably you're going to be able to find him again, that nobody else has shot him.
Right.
On public land, if you leave a deer and let him go, or you never know if someone else came there and shot him the next day, and then you're looking for a deer that's already gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if you had to pick one camo pattern only for Coues deer hunting, what would it be?
Coues bias.
Okay. Favorite boots?
The boots I like right now are an Solo Fugitive or Oslo. They're made in Sweden or anyway, they're made in a Scandinavian country. No,
Okay.
they're made in Romania. Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
Oslo. It's ASALO, and the brand is Fugitive.
Okay.
They're real lightweight, synthetic. And those are the ones I would use in the desert for Coues deer. I really like the Coues Rebel K's, but they're a synthetic boot as well, but they're real super technical and not what I would be using for Coues deer in southern Arizona.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay, favorite backpack?
Coues 7200 Icon Pro.
Okay. And kind of switching gears here, we've been talking archery most of the time, but we always like to ask all our guests, what's your favorite rifle caliber, and what does your rifle setup look like?
I shoot my favorite is a 257 Weatherby. I've been shooting that same gun for a long, long time. I've got a Swarovski 4.5 to 18 scope on it. I'm still shooting the old TDS reticles, but it's a very, very accurate rifle, and I would definitely recommend anyone Coues deer hunting shoot as flat a shooting gun as they can shoot. The 6.5 Creedmoor is coming on, strong. A lot of guys like, but I still love that 257 Weatherby.
Great. Okay, what about your bow setup? What are you shooting?
I'm am right now shooting an Impulse 34. It's a year and a half or 2 years old. I had a elk tag in Utah, not this season but last, and I got a new bow for that, and really like the way it feels. I'm pretty high on that bow.
Okay, so for the Coues deer, like what kind of ranges do you hunt out to if you're doing spot and stock? Is it similar to mule deer where you have to reach out a little bit further?
If you're talking rifle hunting, we shoot them between 300 and 500 yards. Our motto is if we find a big deer that we want to kill, speaking about a rifle, we do not like to get within 300 yards of that deer. There's just so much that can go wrong if you get inside of that 300-yard window. So most of our rifle hunts in Sonora, we shoot them between 300 and 500 yards. They never even know we're there. When you get inside that 300 yards, you get a whole different animal. You get a whole different, wary deer that, hears everything around them, and that can be very difficult, which leads me to, if you guys are going to come down and hunt deer and chase them around with your bows, you need to get a thing called sneaky feet.
Okay, I've heard of those.
And they're made by Sneak Tech.
Okay.
And I have no affiliation with them other than I use them, and they're fantastic, and it gives you a lot of padding, and it makes your stock a lot quieter.
Okay.
Now, how about bow range? What should a guy be competent to with a bow?
Well, I would say if you're spotting and stalking, realistically, you better be able to shoot at, 50 and 60 yards.
Okay.
And even further. I'm not huge into that. If you're sitting water, I would definitely be confident to, 40, 50 yards for sure.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Right on, Jay. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast here. I've learned a ton. I think we all have. For all our listeners out there, I know you have a website as well as you're on Instagram. Anywhere else we can find you, or are you going to be in any shows this year?
I'm actually going to the Western Hunting Convention there in Western Expo in Salt Lake City.
Okay.
And I'm actually going back east to the NWTF convention in Nashville. I'm with my Gould's Turkey business.
Okay.
But yeah, they can, if they want to find out more or get in touch with me, they can go to my website, jscottoutdoors.com. They can follow on my Instagram at jscottoutdoors. And of course, I have my own podcast. I have, I think, 391 episodes. I'll be going on my third year here in February, and it's just the J. Scott Outdoors Western Big Game Hunting and Fishing Podcast. And yeah, guys, wish you the best of success with your podcast, and thanks for all the great questions, and would love to come on again and chat with you about anything else, and just wish you great success with your endeavor.
We'll be in touch for
Yeah,
sure.
thanks again, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay, guys. Take care. All right. I hope you knock them dead when you come down here, okay?
We hope so.
Yeah,
we hope
for sure. All right, Jay. Have a good trip to Mexico.
Okay. Sounds good.